won the game.
They did it! They did it! They did it!
And they're going crazy. They're jumping on each other.
One of the most unbelievable finishes you will ever see.
And welcome to it. Thanks for being with us here on Orioles Magic, the podcast presented by Miller Lite. Brett Hollander and Geoff Arnold with you. And Geoff, today we're going to go back all the way again to October of 2012. This time we're going to chat to a guy who didn't pitch a whole lot of games for Baltimore, but he made his starts count. Joe Saunders will join us coming up.
The wild card game is really what he's known for. And there was obviously a lot of speculation as to why is Joe Saunders pitching this game against the Rangers when his numbers against Texas, going back to his time with the Angels, weren't particularly good. Buck Showalter is a manager that looks at absolutely everything, including splits against teams that you're facing. So I think some people were a little bit curious about it, but he came over to the Orioles, and if you look at why they were so successful in September and how they didn't look at themselves as underdogs, which is something that Saunders talked about in the podcast, a big reason had to do with the way Joe Saunders pitched in the month of September. He was going out there and consistently providing quality starts and good efforts and coming over for the Diamondbacks. It was a dream come true for him to join the Orioles because it was a team that he followed when he was growing up, being not that far away in Virginia, and he put up great numbers in September. That gets him the nod for the wild card game, first year of those one-year wild card games, by the way. And he puts up a great start there. And then you fast forward to the division series, and he was just as good against the Yankees, forcing it into Game 5.
Yeah, I don't remember every aspect of Buck's choice, but here's the breakdown. The Orioles really they played the last series against the Rays in St. Pete, and they were they had clinched when they arrived. There were 3 games left, but were in the division race trying to get out of the wild card game, essentially to the bitter end. So they had really used up their, Jason Hamill had a big year. Wei-In Chen had a big year. Those guys were going 1-2 in the division series anyway. And Chris Tillman had a huge second half. I remember he pitched one of the final games of that regular season. So it wasn't like they had a ton of options. But he'll tell us coming up, Steve Johnson was warming up behind him after like 2 batters in that wild card game.
And I had a former minor league manager who would tell me at one point, if you want to maybe get under the skin of your starting pitcher and you want to give him a little bit of push and be like, you have to pitch a little bit better, get somebody up in the bullpen. And that maybe had that effect where he gets that out against Josh Hamilton. He goes pretty deep. And then you knew that if you were able to get it to that bullpen with O'Day and Mattis and Jim Johnson at the very end, you had pretty good sense that things were going to work out. And sure enough, O'Day pitched great for the couple of innings that he was in. Brian Mattis got some big outs when he came in, and then you turn it over to Jim Johnson. Even though he had that bases loaded situation with 2 outs in the 9th against the Rangers, great offense, he still got out of it and got the Orioles into the division series.
To me, there was something so wonderful and so baseball about the pitching matchup. You had this unreal fireballer who was one of the hottest names in baseball, and still, but at that time especially, in Yu Darvish, going for the Rangers, who won back-to-back pennants against, let's say, in like year 8 or 9 for Joe Saunders. Let's call it crafty. And this wonderful dichotomy between these two, and how it presented itself. And it wasn't like Darvish pitched poorly, but, the Orioles did just enough. And Saunders grit, scratch, clawed his way through 5 2/3. And then, as you said, handed over to that Orioles bullpen.
And that was kind of the way that Joe Saunders pitched. You go all the way back to the story that he told at the very end of our podcast, just about the injury that he suffered earlier on in his career. And he knew that was the type of pitcher that he had to be, where he didn't have overpowering stuff, but he knew how to pitch, and he had a bulldog mentality that he was going to find a way to get you out. As nice as he was on this podcast and as nice of a guy as his reputation led you to believe that, he was, and he is. He's a very nice guy. But you flipped a switch when he got on that mound. He was going to find a way to get you out. And he did that a lot for the Orioles when he came on board in that 2012 season.
All right, let's get to it. Former Oriole left-hander, Joe Saunders. And joining us right now on Orioles Magic, the podcast presented by Miller Lite, is someone who's pitched in one of the bigger games in recent Orioles history. The veteran southpaw of the major leagues, Joe Saunders, is with us right now. And Joe, how you doing?
Good. How you guys doing?
Doing well. Let's go back to that night, October 5th, 2012, in Arlington, Texas, where you bested Yu Darvish in a sudden death game, the wild card game, the first ever wild card game in Major League history. Were you surprised that Buck Showalter gave you the ball that night?
I don't know if surprised is the word. I would say shocked. I'll be honest. I think everybody knew my stats going into Arlington Stadium, and they weren't exactly stellar, I would say, to be nicely. So, for him to show the confidence, he showed in me to give me the ball was, for me was a big step. And then, I had to go out there and, be the true underdog story, if you will.
You'd pitched in a couple of different postseasons before. Did any of that experience help prepare you a little bit better for making that start against the Rangers?
I think so. My experience with the Angels was, let's put it this way. It was, we were in the playoffs, it seemed like almost every year, which was amazing. And, for me to, get that ball in that game, in that kind of situation, I had to reflect on, trying to keep my cool, not trying to do too much, but yet kind of giving it everything you got. So it's kind of that fine line of, controlling your adrenaline, yet, go as hard as you can for as long as you can. So it's basically what I just tried to do.
And here you are against the Rangers, who had won back-to-back pennants. They have their prize possession on the mound. How do you think you were going to navigate through that one to at least give the Orioles a chance and hand it over to probably what was the best bullpen in baseball?
I knew that going in. I was like, hey, if I can keep us kind of in the game and close, I knew our bullpen was, second to none at that point, going into that game. So I was like, if I can just keep us close, maybe, keep it tied or somewhat in control, I knew I was going to be okay. I look back and I go through, I can still go through every hitter, and, especially that first inning where I think I walked Kinsler to lead off, and then I gave up a single. So I first and third with Hamilton up, nobody out, and I'm like, okay, this can go two different ways. This can either go for a ground ball double play and I can get out of this jam, or this is going to get ugly pretty quick. And I remember looking back at the bullpen and seeing Steve Johnson already warming up, and I hadn't even gotten it out yet. So I was like, all right, time to bear down. Let's make a pitch here. And luckily Hamilton rolled it over to and got a nice little 4-6-3 double play and got out of that jam.
Given your experience against the Rangers, how tough was it facing a 1-2 punch like Josh Hamilton and Adrian Beltre, because the Rangers were loaded from an offensive standpoint?
They were. Even going back to my years with the Angels, it wasn't Hamilton or Beltre I was really worried about. It was the smaller guys like the Kinslers, the Andrews, Napoli had a lot of power. I think Michael Young was still there at that time too. I think his numbers are just ungodly against me. Like I couldn't get that guy out to save my life. So for me to pitch the way I did, after that first inning was, it was a confidence builder, obviously, but it also propelled us into that division series against the Yankees.
Yeah, I do want to talk about that coming up. You come over late August in a trade to Baltimore. The Orioles are surprising everyone in not only a wild card race, but really neck and neck with the Yankees at that moment, and take the Yankees all the way to the end of the season and then obviously the division series. What was your impressions of that kind of underdog team that you were traded to in late 2012?
Well, I think everybody kind of wrote us off. Everybody's like, there's no way we're going to match up against these Yankees. It's just a matter of time before, we go on maybe a bit of a losing streak, and we honestly never did. If I remember correctly, every game we lost, I feel like we won the next one, or maybe got a little 2 or 3 game losing streak, or and then won the next 3 in a row. So, we were pretty solid and steady that whole August and September, if I remember correctly. So, but we believed in ourselves. I came into a really good situation, and the guys kind of went about their business, had great leaders. And I just kind of like, I told myself, hey, I just need to do my job. I got along with everybody super great. Buck was amazing. It was a lot of fun.
Your September numbers were really, really good, and it probably had something to do with the fact that the Orioles had such a great last full month of the season. What made that September so good for you when you came to Baltimore?
Well, for me, ever since my career started in 05, I always prided myself on making September games count. It's always nice to play for something in September, and it's kind of that preliminary stage, leading up to the playoffs. And it's just that it's that extra adrenaline flow you get in September, knowing that, hey, if we can push through this, get through this, and scratch away some victories, we can put ourselves in a great position. That was our mindset that whole September.
Not to sound too corny about it, Joe, but obviously you had a long baseball career. But beating Darvish in a sudden death playoff game, where does that one rank for you personally?
It ranks number one for many reasons. Like I said before, like my numbers leading up to there, it was one of those things where no one really gave me a chance, so I kind of had to prove myself, not only to myself but to a lot of other people. And at the time, it was for Buck to give me the ball in that kind of situation, it was just it was a pretty amazing feeling, and it was a lot of pressure, but and a lot of responsibility. But I just told myself, hey, let's piss a lot of people off in Vegas and go win this one and really get a celebration going in Texas.
You talked about the moment earlier on where you had to face Hamilton and you see Steve Johnson warming up. But how about end of game as you're trying to close it out and you're in the ninth inning and Jim Johnson is looking at bases loaded and 2 outs? What's going through your mind at that point?
I'm like, hopefully – I remember Jimmy Johnson would get ground ball after ground ball. So I'm like, hey, Jimmy, let's just get a ground ball to JJ and get out of this jam. And I don't remember how we got the last out. It probably was a ground ball, I think. But I had full confidence. I mean, he was in a lot of pressure packed situations that whole August and September that I remember, and he always managed to either get out of them or our defense would always make a great play behind him to get a huge double play or make an out. So.
Joe, you also start a must-win Game 4 of the division series against the Yankees. I mean, we've gone back a lot over that 2012 series against New York, and you want to talk about every game being a nail-biter. That series was very much up for grabs. The Orioles play out a long extra inning game when you start Game 4 in the Bronx. You have the same exact line in the wild card game and the division series game, 5 2/3 1 run. But you had to navigate those two lineups too. Tell us about that division series.
Well, I mean, the division series was, anytime you go up against the Yankees, it's always high pressure, a lot of energy, a lot of adrenaline, stuff like that. And it was just, I remember it being so much fun. I mean, having Camden Yards packed for the first game. And when I think AJ hit that home run off of CC, I mean, it was pretty, if I remember correctly, I could be wrong, but it was just, I just remember having so much fun and it being a lot of pressure. But I just remember we did our thing. Like the guys there that were before me, they knew they could play with the Yankees. They weren't, what's the word I'm looking for? They weren't
Intimidated?
Yes. Thank you. They weren't intimidated at all. We knew we could play with them. We knew we could beat them actually too. So, for us to take it to the Game 5 and in Game 4, I was just like, hey, let's get this to Game 5 because I liked our chances in Game 5, and then CC just actually, pitched out of his mind, and they scored a couple of early runs off us, but it was a great series.
You were able to minimize the Rangers, and then you pitched, like Brett said, really well against the Yankees. Who's the toughest part of that Yankees lineup back during that time? Because like the Rangers, they were pretty stacked as well.
Yeah, well, for me, it was Jeter. I remember there was one at bat against DJ, and it was, I think, maybe a 1st and 3rd situation or a bases loaded situation. And there was 2 outs. And I remember I threw at least like 12, 13, maybe 14 pitches against this guy. And I guess I remember I actually talked to him about it the next day, but I think probably about pitch number 8, we basically started laughing at each other like, hey, can you please just hit this ball in play so we can get the hell out of here and move on to either the next person or I'm going back in the dugout. So that was definitely the toughest at bat. I remember, Wheaties came out and talked to me at like pitch 13 and said, hey, what do you want to do? I'm like, you know what? We've thrown like 6 or 7 fastballs in a row and he's fouled them all off. It's like, you know what? Let's go breaking ball 3-2. And I just remember, all right, I'm going to throw this breaking ball as hard as I can. Hopefully it's over the plate, and he swings and misses. And fortunate enough, he did it, and we got out of that jam with 2 outs. But, he always just battled me so well. And just actually, talking to DJ the next day, it was such a class act by him. And I just remember talking to him about the at-bat, and we're standing on the sidelines during BP, chatting it up, laughing, going back through the situations, and it was just one of those awesome baseball moments where like you get to talk to one of those future Hall of Fame superstar kind of guys.
Joe, let's talk about a little bit about your baseball journey in life. You're from the Mid-Atlantic region, you're from Virginia. I've always felt the DMV was very underrated as far as producing top quality talent. You're a 1st-round pick. And we can go through the list of names of Virginians and people from our region here who have, gone on to great careers. What was high school and college ball like for you, kind of growing up in our region?
I mean, it was my whole world. I mean, honestly, it was everything I dreamed of. Growing up as a kid, I get to, play ball in Northern Virginia for an unbelievable high school coach in Ron Tugwell. Go to Virginia Tech, where my parents both went to too, and it was met my wife at Virginia Tech. So, I mean, it was one of those things that was, you look back on it now and it was like, wow, like, did this really happen? Like, was this already written in some kind of timeline where, everything just worked out so amazing. So I'm very blessed to have that, childhood and go to those places.
Growing up, before you reached that point, how many Orioles games would you go to a year? I mean, how often would you attend Camden Yards?
We'd go. I think my dad and mom would take me probably once or twice. We'd sit up in that higher kind of right field section. I remember looking down and seeing Cal play, seeing Chris Hoyles, the Mike Mussinas, all those classic Orioles play, and it's to get traded to them and then help them make it to the playoffs was it was a dream come true. I'll be honest.
Who was a pitcher you like to watch growing up?
For me, it was Glavine. I was always a Glavine guy because I wasn't a Randy Johnson. Obviously, I couldn't throw 100 with a wipeout slider. So to me, like guys that actually had to pitch and had to like kind of locate, always guys I tried to emulate.
When you made it to the Angels, and really I think the first year with them, you made probably 2 starts, something like that. And I think the next year you kind of went back and forth between AAA and the big leagues. And you were on a staff that featured John Lackey and Bartolo Colon. What did you learn from those 2 guys once you finally made it to the big leagues on a more permanent basis?
John Lackey probably, he was probably my best teammate I can probably ever say. I mean, he took me under his wing. He kind of showed me the ropes and, what to do, what not to do. And, basically showed me like, hey, the more work you put in, the better results you're going to get out of everything in life and in sports. So, and he would always invite us out to dinners and just basically take care of all the young guys. And I just remember how gracious and thankful I was to him, basically when my career was over, and I called him and just said, hey, thank you for being you. Thanks for being like probably the best teammate I ever had. And, he was just a good friend.
Going back to the 2012 wildcard game, and you were talking about stuff. I mean, obviously at this point in your career, you're towards the end. This is not, you popping into the big leagues, velocity-wise, I think. But your ability to just kind of go pitch by pitch with that team and to survive hitter by hitter, take us through the mentality. I mean, people use the word grit in sports and throw it around pretty loosely, but that was the ultimate, to me, grit performance by somebody on a mound.
I appreciate that. Like my mentality, honestly, was, give it everything you got and try to be as perfect as you can be. The nice thing about, facing professional hitters is you can kind of, get away with a mediocre pitch on pitch one because, they like to be more patient. It's honestly the younger guys that are more aggressive that kind of give, some of the veteran pitchers some headaches because they are so aggressive early in the count. So, just getting ahead. I remember telling myself before that game, I was like, hey, I got to get ahead of these guys because if I'm going to be working from behind in 2-0, 3-1 kind of counts like that, it's going to be a rough night, and it's also going to be really tough too. So, getting ahead of them. Also, when I did get ahead, making quality good pitches. I don't remember how many guys I struck out. I might have struck out like maybe 5, maybe 6 or something like that. But just making quality pitches early on, like putting them on the defensive rather than me being always on the defensive. I remember thinking about that.
How much pride do you take in your longevity as a major leaguer when you didn't maybe have the type of overwhelming stuff that somebody like a John Lackey would have or Felix Hernandez had when he was in his time with the Mariners? I mean, how much pride did you take in that fact that it was your pitch ability and your knowledge of how to attack hitters in the grit that you had that allowed you to stick in the big leagues for so long?
Well, I'll be honest. I got hurt the first year after I got drafted. I got hurt. I had a torn rotator cuff and a detached labrum in 2003. So I missed a whole year. And I remember Dr. Yoakum for the Angels. He told me once, like, hey, you can either basically spend 2 years and have surgery, or you can try to rehab it and just get it as strong as you can be. So that was kind of the turning point very early on in my minor league career. I wasn't even close to making it to the big leagues at that point. So I look back on it, like for me to pitch 10 some odd years in the big leagues and have the career that I have and not had surgery and pitch 200 innings multiple times and make it to the playoffs. And, it was really, I really feel blessed. And, I've got a lot of people to thank, obviously, along the way for pushing me and helping me, through all those tough times. But, looking back, I mean, I had a very blessed career.
Pandemic and what we're going through now aside, how closely do you follow the game in retirement?
I do. I try to follow through, trade rumors and obviously, watching TV a bit. I've got a couple of buddies that are still, into the game and working for organizations. So I try to stay as close as I can.
With your wife being a former Virginia Tech softball player, have you gotten a kick out of maybe seeing some of these different videos where players are training with their wives or fiancés and maybe they're helping them continue to stay in shape while we wait for baseball?
It is. I mean, it's tough times, but it's also interesting in the fact that if you look at it from 2 different angles, like one angle is like yeah, we're cooped up and we don't have sports and, everybody's, going through really hard times. Or you can look at it like, hey, we're very fortunate right now to be able to kind of take a break, take a step back, kind of, take your foot off the gas a little bit and spend some quality time with your family. And I think this has been a great opportunity not only for myself, but for other people to really kind of focus on what's important in life and, not so much the hustle and bustle and not worrying about yourself, but really focusing on your family and staying strong and healthy.
Well, Joe, it's been a lot of fun reliving some of those moments from now, 8 years ago, basically, when you shined in a couple of playoff games for the Orioles.
Seems like yesterday.
Joe Saunders, the old Southpaw. Thank you so much, Joe.
All right. Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
Orioles Auctions is the official online auction of the Baltimore Orioles. New autographed and authenticated items are now available, including Miguel Castro autograph ball, a DJ Stewart signed bat, Richie Martin autograph bat, Alex Cobb autograph jersey, Austin Wynn's autograph jersey. Our pal Stevie Wilkerson has got an autograph jersey available. All proceeds from this Memorial Day auction benefit TAPS. Learn more at Orioles.com/auctions. Auction ends Sunday, May 31st at 10 p.m. I want some Stevie Wilkerson autograph memorabilia for my collection.
We all need more Stevie Wilkerson in our lives, Geoff. I've decided that. All right, speaking of what's to come here, let's get into the draft. We're now kind of bearing down on this, a few weeks away. You have a lot of mocks coming out with less baseball, obviously, right now. It's a good way to occupy the baseball brain. It looks like Torkelson is going to be the pick of Detroit at 1. I mean, I guess it doesn't. You never know these things. We've seen upsets before, but it seems to be the way that he's the consensus. He's kind of it wasn't a consensus until like maybe a few months ago, but it's kind of crossed over in that. And then I think there's more of a debate about 2. It could be the left-hander Lacey, or it could be Martin, which I would say is the consensus at 2. The infielder, outfielder for Vanderbilt.
To me, they probably pick Austin Martin because traditionally, if you look at drafts, picking a pitcher this high generally hasn't worked out all that well. I mean, if you go back and look at Cy Young Award winners that were picked at the very top of the first round, you don't see a whole lot of them in there. And especially in a season like this last one for college baseball, where you didn't play a whole lot of games, I think there's going to be more of an inclination to take a position player over a pitcher. And from the Orioles' perspective, this doesn't hurt. You're going after best player available at the top of the draft. But where the Orioles have a lot of weaknesses, it is in terms of infielders, outfielders, guys that will fit into that kind of mold. You don't have a lot of those people at the very top of your system. Austin Martin might be the best, one of the best hitters for average in the entire draft. And he's probably going to me, be a third baseman, a second baseman, or a center fielder. I think he's played a little bit of shortstop, but it doesn't seem like that's probably where he'll be long term. So for me, I say probably Martin. And I think it's more likely, given that the Tigers have been going with a lot of pitching because they've picked high in the last couple of drafts. Torkelson's viewed as the best hitter and somebody that's pretty close to major league ready. So I say they probably go with him. That being said, and even though if you look at the Orioles from a pipeline perspective and the number of left field, third base, first base types that they have in their system, Torkelson's bat is so special, and you just don't see all that many first basemen going 1-1 in the history of the draft. I can't think of any off the top of mind right now as we're doing this. I still think you would probably pick him if he drops to you, but I don't think he'll be on the board, and probably Martin would be who you go with it too.
I believe that organizational need has to be a consideration at this part of a draft, more than most people. I mean, yes, there are times if that arm is there, if that slugger's there, you just got to go with it in a baseball draft. But I feel much better about the Orioles' outfield minor league depth right now, especially in the upper echelon levels, at least from a depth perspective, than I do maybe infield. But Martin could be second, could be short, could be third, could be outfield. One thing is clear: this draft is loaded with between 15 and 50. It looks like, as far as the mocks go, of college shortstops who are really good. That's obviously an organizational need. They drafted a couple last year in rounds like 4 and 5 or so. But this group far better than I do right now, Geoff, when you look at minor league infielders for the Orioles at different levels of development. You have the second-round pick a few years ago in creating Grenier. You have Adam Hall, who a lot of people in the organization like as far as someone who's going to be moving along here at some point. You have Mason McCoy. You have a lot of guys. I don't know if anyone there is a lock, obviously. There's never such a thing. But you would like to have some infusion here of some really high-end talent that you could think can move quickly, whether that's at pick 30 or at pick 2.
And to me, among that group that you mentioned, Grenier is great defensively. I didn't have a chance to see Adam Hall, but he had a great year last year with the Delmarva Shorebirds. And then Mason McCoy similarly had an impressive 2019 season. Those a couple of those guys could very well be major leaguers. I just don't necessarily know if I see them as impact major leaguers. So you pick somebody like Martin, you look at somebody that could very well play second base for you down the road or third base. Like I said, I don't think he probably is going to be your shortstop in the future. And then you have the option too, if you put him in center field. But the Orioles value flexibility as far as being able to play a lot of different positions. And Martin, I was going back and watching a game that he played earlier this year when they had that MLB Network game against Michigan. The biggest thing that I noticed was that he was reading pitches really well, and he faced some pretty good Michigan pitching in that game. So I was impressed with the way that he was just tracking pitches and how it looked like he had a plan when he was up there. Obviously, that's just watching one game. But if you look at some of the numbers from his 2019 season and the product that he is and the place where he was playing, the conference that he is playing in, I think that also gives Martin a leg up and makes him a pretty good fit for the Orioles.
Yeah, there seems to be a sense that he's just a terrific athlete. He's also someone like Adley Rutschman, who's played in so many meaningful college games, meaningful games on the biggest stage. To me, listen, I'm not a scout. I'm not a front office guy, but I've tracked this stuff for a while. That to me has a lot of value. And someone like Rutschman and Martin have, had moments where they've carried teams in important spots. And then, to play in the SEC night in, night out, weekend series after weekend series, that's just a different caliber of college baseball. And, I put a lot of weight in that. And when you're looking at this rebuilding blocks, I mean, I've said for years now, the Orioles to me weren't starting at zero. The prospect depth has gotten better and better. Certainly by the time this draft is over and you look at the picks the Orioles have added, the second pick, the 30th pick, and then a few picks later as well, you're going to see a top 10 and a top 25, top 30 that will probably be among the best in baseball. I mean, I really believe that, and maybe extrapolate it out a little more when you're talking about having, someone like a Rutschman, a Grayson Rodriguez, a Hall, a Martin. I mean, that's a good-looking top 4 or 5 that any organization would probably covet every one of those guys. A Mountcastle I should throw in there as well. I mean, listen, you don't win the AAA International League MVP accidentally at his age.
The Orioles farm system already took a massive jump by just adding Rutschman last year and then some of the other high picks that they were able to add into their system. But not only is it going to be individuals that stand out among maybe the top 40 or 50 best prospects in all of minor league baseball, but it's going to be your entire system, which you're trying to infuse with some more depth. And this is a draft that's supposed to be really good, probably the best pool of players that you've had in the last decade. And also don't forget the number of maybe veteran college players who don't get picked later on, who maybe don't have a reason to try and go back next year to school, even though they'll have the ability to do so. And consider the fact where the Orioles are. There's opportunities for playing time. So if you can maybe snatch somebody and give them a $20,000 signing bonus, which this year is capped at right now, that might be an investment for the Orioles to make, and you will have a bunch of different players looking at the opportunity to reach the major leagues quickly. And if they have the skill set that lines up with what the Orioles are looking for, and if the player has an interest in joining an organization where he knows if I perform, there could be an opportunity for me at the major leagues sooner rather than later, that could be pretty enticing for both parties.
It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's coming up. The baseball draft, obviously a shortened one this year, but it's all Orioles. I mean, when you look at the volume of picks they have in this shortened draft, which will be a sprint. Well, Geoff, it's been real. We'll talk again soon, my friend.
All right, Brett, stay safe.
This has been Orioles Magic, the podcast presented by Miller Lite.